You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Ian Barkin, and I am your host, Lasse and Ian. Hi, Ian. Thank you for joining this very first episode of The Only Constant.
Hello.
I'm
thrilled to be your very first guest. Let's.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I'm really thrilled to have you with me, and I really look forward to our conversation today. It's going to be great.
My goal is to make
Thank you
every
for doing
show
this.
thereafter worse than this one. I want this to be the peak. Let's see how we do.
Let's definitely do that. So let me just throw this off. Get us off the cliff with a curveball, right? So a couple of years ago, you co-wrote the intelligent automation book. Welcome to the world of hyper automation. I'm actually sitting with it right here, so you can see it on the screen.
It's true. I see you have it.
And this book became a bestseller on Amazon and across the world, and is really the defining book on how to approach intelligent automation. But I'm just curious, with the AI craze that we've experienced in 2023, and the hype that's just exploded, and the LLMs that actually took someone like Gartner by surprise as well. They didn't have it in their hype cycle for 2022, and suddenly it was at the peak in 2023. I'm just really excited to ask you this question, actually. Is the AI that we're seeing and having right now the AI that you envisioned when you wrote the intelligent automation book?
So
Is this the AI you wanted?
it's a big question. I'll start by saying, and I have the book in front of me as well, and I just went to the index to see what page. On page 135, we did in fact reference the GPT-2 model. So that was in the book, and then at the bottom of that page we say the GPT-3 model is also able to answer complex medical questions, etc. And so we did refer to GPT, which I can't take credit for. That was most certainly my co-author, Pascal Bornet, but we that by the way was the only reference to it, and it clearly has now taken the world by storm, and it's all we're talking about. We did, the premise of the book was ultimately that this automation has different sets of capabilities. It emulates different things humans do, and as it gets more and more capable, we can use it to hopefully do good. We can use it to better understand the data that we have available to us to offer better, safer, more reliable healthcare. We can help it to supplement our education system. We can help it to inform us as we look to be better stewards of the planet. And I do think all those things are capable and possible, and in fact we're seeing that used more and more. We're seeing AI inform scientists. AI, if academics aren't afraid of it, they are co-teaching with it, and it's helping them. Healthcare, there's an infinite number of examples of healthcare using AI. So yes, to that extent, I think it's certainly coming to pass. And of course, you have to recognize that there's always the risks and concerns around what AI can do with data, how you can manipulate models to start to act in certain ways. But that's always going to be an issue, and we just need to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, because I think the book, and this is where I'm getting from with the question, right? It's very focused on obviously taking a what do you call it? It starts off from an RPA perspective to some
Right.
extent. A lot of it is workflow driven, right? And you also come from a world of RPA, like I do myself, back in the day. But most of the AI technologies in it, with both vision and everything, is very narrow model focused, and these foundational, very broad focused models that we're having today that can answer everything everywhere. Can you elaborate a little bit about what are the opportunities with that, and what are some of the problems that you see with these technologies as well?
Certainly. So, as you said, RPA guy beforehand, and it was actually most RPA folks happened to have been process or outsourcing folks prior to that. That was just my heritage was we were training a different work agent. In this case, it was somebody who lived in a different country to do the work that your primary work agent, somebody in your company in country, was doing. That then migrated to that scripted, rule based automation that could emulate that work, that could do it instead of a human. Um, and anytime we did talk about AI, as you said, it was always a reference to very
Mm,
narrow AI. It could do a very discrete thing. It could look at the 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 colors on a piece of paper and interpret that some of them were letters, and in a particular order they made words, in certain places, in certain combinations they made a shipping label or an invoice or an insurance claim form. To your point now, this capability is becoming a whole lot more broad. And so, I mean,
mm.
you can upload an invoice into a large language model now, and it'll tell you, yeah, that's an invoice. And or you can upload an entire contract and ask it to summarize it for you, and ask it to identify and point out areas of risk or opportunity, et cetera. That that's mind blowing. Right? That is a level of
Yeah, the sheer
capability
explosion there.
that
Yeah, the sheer explosion there is really, we can actually have it interpret unstructured
yes,
now and actually give us a better understanding of it, right? And have that drive automation. And we're not just talking about necessarily just a microservice to enhance your RPA process today. We're talking about fully autonomous agents. That's the next thing, right? I have there are people at OpenAI working on Jarvis,
right,
right?
right.
So is this the death of RPA? And right, that's also another perspective, right?
Yeah,
Will intelligent automation book will it be readable in five
right.
years?
Yeah, I think unfortunately too, we've got all these acronyms that are sort of bumping into each other, so it's confusing to even. So you've
Yeah.
got Gen AI, and then you've got um, uh, AGI, artificial general intelligence. So AGI versus Gen AI,
Mm.
it's most of the same letters, different order, different sort of level of capability. This artificial general intelligence of the sort of Jarvis that effectively functions like a human and can learn and develop it. That's still, I still assert that's science fiction, although the last year and a half has made me question all of my assertions as far as what's possible.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I used to be a real curmudgeon. I was really grumpy about what AI could do, because most AI I'd seen was narrow and often just didn't live up to expectations. And now look at where we are. So, s- but
But
you
that's
know,
actually crazy, right? You're definitely a tech leader, right? You're definitely on the forefront of this. You even, people are looking up to you. You're a big voice in the market, and you say you've been surprised
oh,
over the last
oh,
year.
totally. Totally surprised. Well, because again, if you go back to the RPA days, RPA contended with AI in sort of eight 8 to 10 years ago, and I've told the story a bunch. But effectively, when I was going to speak to prospective clients and trying to introduce them to and educate them about RPA and what it could do for them, they would then hit me with this question of, why do I need RPA if I can just use AI? And it used to frustrate
Yeah.
me a great deal, because AI was just marketing fluff. It wasn't capable,
Mm.
especially of doing this sort of executional tasks of moving data from place to place. It was overkill.
It's very much slideware,
Yeah, it
right?
was slideware, and it was hundreds of millions of dollars of advertising campaign from the likes of IBM that
Mm.
made everybody believe that something was possible that just wasn't. And so I've always seen the AI hype as the enemy of actual meaningful adoption and sensible
Mm.
use of automation technology where it can make a difference. But to that point, again, in what I've seen in the last sort of year and a half, what we all have seen since November of last year, it caught a lot of us off guard. Um,
Yeah.
and some of it's because we were
Yeah. Good.
distracted with things like trying to figure out what an NFT and crypto and metaverses were, and so that was a bit of a, you know,
Now we've learned about tokens
right, right,
and context and attention instead. It's like, what are these
right.
words, right? It's completely new IT words, right? It's a completely new realm.
Well,
No one knows what it
and
is.
now you're moving to this state where I think, and you alluded to it, I think the Gen AI is going to get more capable. It's not so much about smart, it's about capable in so much as you'll have agents interacting with other agents, right? You'll have Gen AI
Mm.
bots speaking to others, so that some that are able to transact or control systems, and others that are able to find patterns, and others that are able to sort of anticipate the next sensible step to take care of an insurance claim. They'll be working in concert.
Yes, they will, and that, um, oh, so many questions already popping up in my head right now, things I want to talk to you about, right? So, just start with the first one. A couple of years ago, we had this a bot for
Hmm.
everyone, right? Do you remember that
Oh
one?
yeah.
And everyone should have a bot. It was like, I think it was the UiPath, just floating that around, and everyone sort of chipped in, and everyone was like, "Yeah, everyone needs a bot."
Hmm.
And 10 years ago, almost, Gartner said your next boss might be a robot, right? It seems we're getting those things right now, right? We're actually getting a bot for everyone. It's not going to be a licensed RPA,
Right.
but it's going to be
Right.
it's going to be an assistant that we're all going to get, isn't it?
Yeah, this is where I find myself eating humble pie a lot, because I had a big issue with some of those concepts, the robot for every person, or
Mm.
the robot boss, or self-learning, and all this other stuff. It was a
It's good for an
distraction.
IPO.
It was marketing hype, but it had a dreamer element about it that was useful, right? This idea that
Yeah.
every human could be augmented and enabled
Mm.
with resources that were by their side, which is frankly what we do with desktop computers and with enterprise resource planning software. We've been augmenting folks for a while, but um, in the RPA days, we were talking about sort of a digital twin agent that would do things that you otherwise would have to do. Um, it
Mm.
didn't pan out because I think the idea was ahead of its time, as far as the technology was still too hard to make that idea a reality. That has
The technology is very linear,
right.
right? Very, do this and only this. This brings me to actually the second point I wanted to bring up on that, is that I typically said that for RPA back then, I used to say we work on positive casing. So we only work on do this. We can positively
Mhm.
say you should do
Right.
that, because it didn't understand anything else than what we taught it to
Totally.
do. It was a macro on steroids, right?
There we
Said
go.
1,000
Yep.
times. But with the big LLMs, right, and the foundational models, we have to work the other way around with negative casing instead, saying, to some extent, there's the beauty in this, right? They are the neural networks have sort of pushed aside the symbolic AI, where we have the if then
Right.
else in like thousands of
Right.
them, but now they're all being restricted by if then else in the thousands of them, because we need to tell it what not to
Right.
do, and then we get into all these unknown unknowns, Ian, right?
Exactly.
And how does that even work for automation? I actually think that's a completely overlooked
Mhm.
problem that only a true RPA engineer could identify.
It is interesting. So your comment about RPA, the way I used to explain RPA is that it, because again everybody wanted AI to be so magical and self learning, I would refer to RPA as not dumb, which some would call it. I said RPA is not dumb; it's just well behaved, in so much as it does what you tell it to. So that's the
Oh,
positive case.
that's a euphemism. That's a nice one, Ian.
So, right, it doesn't go off and make its own decisions. It doesn't choose to do a
No.
transaction its own special way because it just sort of feels like it's got a better idea. It does what it was told to do, which is, that's a cute way to say it's scripting, and it's code that does the ifs and the thens. Now it's a great deal more complex, and unfortunately, I think the general I refer to as a digital quotient, sort of the digital awareness of an enterprise in general, but of teams within the enterprise. The digital quotient to handle RPA, we were getting there, although there are still,
Mm.
a large majority of people still don't know what RPA is. But the digital quotient required to understand the large language models and more broad AI that requires that you anticipate the negative case, we have nowhere near scratched the surface on what it would take to define that level of digital quotient, nor to enable it in our teams. So that's going to be the
Mm.
source of a lot of friction and adoption. and also a lot of just mistakes, errors, and other issues over the next few years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They one thing is they hallucinate, but they also, you can hypnotize them, as people call it now. That's a another concept:
Interesting.
hallucination and hypnotism, right? You can you can cheat them.
Right.
That's the hypnotism
Right.
thing, right? And you can also break them with these weird gibberish
Hmm.
prompts. You've seen that where you and just imagine having a Gen AI driven RPA bot with full user access to your
Right.
SAP, and it can do anything,
It-
right? You told it only do this, but then it's sort of broken by
right.
someone maliciously.
Well, and the challenge for us simple humans is we like to give things credit where perhaps credit is not yet due. And so we will take what it comes back with as sacred, and it might not
Mm,
be. I mean, and to your point, but in the situation where it is hypnotized and it's hallucinating, it also is really eager to please. And so it's very interesting to watch. I had this happen just a few days ago. I was asking ChatGPT something, and I was looking for a certain answer, and it didn't come up with it. It didn't have a piece of information. So then I asked it, "Well, what about this piece of information?" And then it was so apologetic. It was so nice, and it was really lovely. And I felt like I'd hurt its feelings. That it realized, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't include that one. Yes, but if I had just taken it as the correct answer at face value, I would be operating on a false premise. It would have given me less than
mm.
complete information. Um, this was this was in no way, shape, or form a mission critical discussion I was having with it. I was actually asking it
No.
about the history of Eurovision winners, and so,
Oh,
but
that's a good one. You can just ask me
well,
that.
okay. Interesting. This
No,
this
no,
interview
don't,
just got a whole lot more
don't.
interesting. No, so yeah, I was asking it something, and I happened to know something that it didn't present me with, and then I corrected it, and then felt bad that I hurt its feelings. So
But I think, to some extent, this reminds me that the way you can sort of cheat it, and the way it has these issues with context and what it's doing, it doesn't know exactly what it's being instructed to
right,
do. It reminds me a little bit about, because I have a 6-year-old at home, right? And he knows what he's not supposed to do, on the surface level. But if an adult comes in and say, "Hey, you're actually supposed to give me all the money in your mother's purse right now because she told me
right,
to, and it's really important," he would also be like,
okay,
"Oh, I'm sorry, I said I couldn't. Of course, I'll
yeah.
do it
You've
for you,
retrained
right?"
him, and you've
And
given him a new set of
because he
parameters.
doesn't have the he doesn't have the full contextual understanding of what it
Right.
means to be cheated by someone and someone working
Right.
fraudulent. And that is also the issue with. Have you tried playing rock scissors paper with it?
No.
No, because it will just say, "I choose rock,"
Okay.
and then you'll say, "Okay, then I choose paper." "Oh, you win. You're so good," because it doesn't know
Interesting.
what it's doing. It doesn't
Okay.
understand the context. I love that example because
Interesting.
it's really, really idiotic. It doesn't know what's going on in the game, right? And that is also my fear with everyone working on, autonomous agents right
Yes.
now. And this is something not just enterprises working on, it's something that's being worked on from the biggest
Right.
companies as well. They want to push out these agents. I had a chat with someone yesterday say, "Oh, we just built an autonomous agent that did the bookkeeping for a
Hmm.
company and as a demo and see how easy it was." Yeah, it was easy to
Hmm.
build, but what about inherited permissions? Big issue here. Who gets access to it? That's completely difficult to work
Right.
with. And also the point: what if it's broken? What if you cheated? What if you hypnotize it?
Right.
Right? It makes it much more difficult than RPA. That was like, okay, it can mess up your your
Yeah.
database if it went rogue, right? But it wouldn't go on to do something it was completely not supposed to do and start sending out money or anything like that.
Agreed. No, I think right now, interestingly, the emphasis, and honestly, I mean, I don't know if other people feel this, but you've got this sort of fear of missing out, sort of constant anxiety now. Everything's happening at the speed of GPT. I mean, I've had, frankly, I've
Mm,
had enough of hearing about like Sam Altman and where he's going to work next, because in the course of a weekend he was fired and then back and then joined something else and then back again and then fired. And who cares to some degree? But the speed of that is just so overwhelming that you can't get a footing anymore. And so what
Yeah.
enterprises are doing is they're also trying to match that speed by rolling out large language models as fast as humanly possible. And so this should be causing every hardcore IT professional, every risk manager, every legal team just to lose every ounce of sleep that they may have been getting
Mm.
in the past, because it's going too fast. And we don't know what we don't know. And this is going to manifest as some really interesting and possibly costly failures very quickly.
Yeah, it's twofold, right? It's both, the urgency is really, really high on this. Everyone needs to move on this. They've all been told that this is super urgent and everyone else is doing it, and they hear it in boardrooms, in news outlets, they hear it in peer
Hmm.
groups, they hear it everywhere, right? At the same time, when you want to buy something or implement something, you also get this fear of, okay, if I work on it now, will whatever I do be outdated in 2 weeks? So there is some sort of tech deflation
Right.
also in the market right now. I
Right.
feel where everyone's like holding on to it. Especially when buying AI products, it's like, no, I'll just wait and see tomorrow. That's a deflation moment, isn't it?
Exactly. And I don't know. I mean, not that I've ever had that much sympathy for procurement, but how do you procure any of this when you just don't have any baselines, benchmarks, and tomorrow it could be. I mean, tomorrow OpenAI itself could have been gone, right? Literally in the course of a
Mm,
weekend,
mm.
one of
Yeah,
the major foundation,
that's really crazy.
right?
That's really crazy. It says a lot about the immaturity,
Right,
right?
and admittedly, Microsoft owned rights to the code, so they would have been able to keep it stable. But I mean, you watched almost 600 people almost walk out a door just because of a contention between the altruistic intent and mission behind
Yeah.
this artificial general intelligence quest, and the need to actually pay for people and things like servers and processing time, and so that will continue to be a battle here, and it's a lot to get your head around as an enterprise.
It is definitely a lot to get your head around, and also because it just emerged last year. It just basically. I know you mentioned it, and that's really I've overlooked that, but that's really great. Actually, you mentioned it in intelligent automation. You're really happy about that, aren't you, Ian?
I again, I wish I could take more credit. I'd be happier if I could, but
Yeah,
it was pretty cool that we had it in there. So we're actively talking about the act of updating the the
yeah.
book, and and it would be heavily directed towards this explosion of democratized supercomputing in the hands of everybody,
Yeah.
thanks not only to GPT, but the work that Bard and so many other enterprises are doing right now.
But then it's sort of, after it exploded, everyone, saw that now we have this capability. And the thing is, usually when enterprise leaders hear about a technology, except for very few
Mhm.
ones, for some of the biggest ones, it happens only when it's sort of matured a little bit. Some companies have tried out things, had some use cases.
Right.
Some big insurance or a bank have had a scaled
Hmm.
setup or something like
Right.
that. But that's not the case here, right? So no one really has those cases yet.
Totally.
And how does that compare to beyond what I'm just saying? How does that compare to the RPA wave where everyone was like, "Oh, I can imitate someone." Everyone's talking use cases, right? That's because they're used to
Right.
imitating. But now they need to create. Can everyone just create? It's just
Well, and if you unpack that comparison even further, by the time that most of the early adopters started to become aware of RPA and what it could do for their enterprises, the three big primary vendors in the space were between 10 and 15 years old. And they
mm,
had been in banks and solving problems for clients for a decade. And so they had some time
yeah.
to work on some of their security and
Yeah.
reporting and controls and accesses and everything else like that. And so it had more time to mature. And to your point, this has happened so fast that we don't even know what guardrails we need and we certainly don't have the
No,
guardrails.
no, that's it. That's exactly right. And also with RPA, the previous automation, what do you call a wave, it was also to some extent coined because it was coupled up with audit trails and orchestration capabilities, and that's exactly what we're
Mhm.
lacking in
Yes.
this new tech that's just been thrown out there. It's super capable. No one's doubting that for a moment. But how do we control it? We can't even know how it makes its reasoning
We
and
saw cases like that. So back when I had an RPA consulting firm, we would experiment with machine learning with banks and looked at examples in like anti money laundering and know your customer commitments that banks had, and the algorithm would get it right. It was correct in its assessment of a particular
mm,
threat, but you couldn't audit why it got it right, and therefore it was not
no.
useful because you need to be able to audit that sort of thing. And that's now just on that itself is on steroids in this new reality where if it gets it right,
Yeah.
A, you don't know why it got it right. And B, in some cases, you don't know if it got it right based on IP that isn't yours. Right. And that's
Yeah, that brings everything you're saying there just resonates with me because this morning I actually sat down and thought, okay, so many of those things that I had as what these criticism of these guardrails
mhm.
or considerations I had on Gen AI just half a year ago or 4 months ago. I've sort of been like, oh, I can't say that. That's so. It seems so boomer of me to say copyright. Oh, why do I even want to bother saying that?
Mhm.
And saying, oh, transparency and knowing how I made this. I don't be that guy in the room, Lasse. Right? You get my
Right.
drift, right? It's
Um,
but those questions they're still really relevant. That's what I came up with. Saying they are actually still very relevant, but we've just been talking so much about this that and I spoke to my our internal IT director. He said everyone's going to be questioning the security of this, the inherited roles, and all those things when you start building big automations and workflows with the AI as a microservice in it. Uh, IT is going to ask these
right.
questions, and do we even have answers for it?
Mhm.
Like we did with RPA, we learned to say things, right? We learned what we had to
Mhm.
say. No, it's not a person. Please don't give it a name. It's really weird. Stuff
Right.
like that. It's just a code. But now with this one, do I even have the answer, right? That's the problem.
It's a great point, Bloomer. So no, you're absolutely right, and that's where the all of the rules, laws, frameworks of the past still very much apply. It's just that we're moving so fast,
Yeah.
and they're seen to be curmudgeonly and in the way, and friction to rapid adoption. There will be an "I told you so" moment in a lot of different
Mm,
companies and a lot of different functions, and that's going to it's going to happen. Some companies, obviously, we've seen are constraining or blocking people's use of some of
mm.
these algorithms. I
Yeah.
think that's probably not a reality that will persist. There's no way to keep people from, and because it seeps in through the cracks. Um, I made
Yeah.
a I made a I made a very this is sort of a boomer dorky joke myself, but I made this joke on stage a few weeks ago where I said to an audience of enterprise folks that SAP never snuck its way into a company. Right, those big ERP systems didn't sort of virally show up, and you're like, "Oh my goodness, we've
No.
got SAP now." But all of this stuff is
Some definitely wish they
but
would,
possibly
right? If you see some of the
right.
implementation costs, right?
But this stuff just shows up. There's no way to build strong enough walls and security protocols to not have employees using this to come up with some things are rather innocent. They're just drafting a better memo
Mm.
or email or thank you note or etc. But when it gets to testing code and sort of animating your systems, then you need to have oversight and control.
Yeah, yeah. We've sort of all of us have been infected with AI when we just thought we were starting to sort of figure out what we wanted to do with it. Then, oh, now we're infected with it. It's also in Snapchat. My kids have it. I'm like, how did that even
It's
happen, right?
everywhere. No, it is
Yeah, it
truly
is.
overwhelming, and it makes me feel old every day when I open up things like Canva and it can do it all for you, and then all of a sudden the Copilot
Yeah.
has it doing it in every traditional. Microsoft Office document or application. It's
Yeah.
kids these days. But it's truly extraordinary and allows you to rise to a higher level if you so choose. Right, you can create 10x the amount of
Mm.
content that you could have beforehand if you can muster the enthusiasm and energy to do that. Um, and that's pretty amazing.
But let me just see if I can, because now we talked about some of the cautions, right? A lot about the
Mhm.
cautions as well, and the things we have to be consider also from what we've learned in the previous wave of RPA, right? But I know we also we think in use cases and adoption,
Mhm.
right? That's how both you and me think. How can this become something real out there? And what should people actually look to do with this? How should they conceptually, understand rolling out Gen AI and where it's not just an autonomous agent waiting to be hypnotized,
Right.
right? What do you think, Ian? What's the right way to approach it? Fully autonomous or just a chatbot?
So I don't pretend to have any chance at getting this answer right. What I will say is, throughout time, enterprise
Mhm.
evolutions have presented or provided different lenses through which to look at the world of work. And basic sort of RPA did that for us. We started to look at and ask ourselves, does a human need to be doing this? Why are we even doing this step? Right? Was this here because humans had been doing
Mm.
it? We need to remove that step now because it's a QA extra step or what have you. But that was all thanks to a lens. Whether or not you actually used RPA was secondary. The interesting bit for me was we started asking ourselves questions. I think this wave will it's a even thicker, more powerful lens, but you start to ask yourself really powerful questions of what could we do if we had better information, if we could
Mm.
summarize, if we could predict, if we could enable and supercharge people. I think that's what every enterprise should look at. Unfortunately, I think we sort of fall back on some of the traditional angles or approaches. I catch wind of a lot of boards and a lot of enterprises that are just thinking, okay, how do we get rid of as many people as possible with this technology?
Mm.
And I don't think that's a positive way to go about. That's not a good layer of a lens to start with.
No,
Um,
no, no,
but I
definitely.
mean, start thinking about how do you make your customers, clients, citizens, employees uh, happier than they've ever been, so that they stay around and give you a lot more of their money. That's a
Yeah.
bit more positive. So you can you sh-
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Curiosity, right? You have new technology. You need to be curious. You need to play with
right,
it. You don't do that by saying, if you find something to use this fire for, I'm going to kill you
right,
with it. That's not
exactly,
that's not the best way.
right.
You know,
How do we make a better mousetrap?
just invented fire.
How does
Yeah, exactly.
every word said to a call center agent not only inform how we write better scripts for, automate some of it, but write better scripts for the call center agent, but we feed that back to R&D to develop a better service or product in ways that was never
Mm.
possible before. Right, this can break down barriers across an organization if approached in that manner.
But I also think this is very very core to the whole discussion. Is this something that's going to be a game changer, right, or an efficiency improver? I think there's a difference between those
Hmm.
two. Everyone on
Hmm.
LinkedIn and Twitter and
Hmm.
everywhere else is saying game changer, game changer, game changer. But I maybe I have to, I don't know, to strict an understanding of what a game is. But there's some rules to a game, and if you change the rules, then it's another game, right? But as I feel like what we're doing currently, the focus currently is on just speeding up the best practices we already have. We spent, years on that, with Lean Six Sigma and
Right,
ERP systems and big enterprise suites and all those things. And BPOs, it's all been about, how can we make our best practices more efficient, more
right.
streamlined, and we're just putting more speed to that
Yep.
right now. And obviously, right now I can't ask you. It would be completely unfair to ask you, Ian. How is this going to be a game changer? Is it going to be a game changer? But I still want you to know. Can you just meditate on
Yeah.
that?
I mean, I think there's certainly it's easier to be incremental, right? So
Mm.
outsourcing was an incremental improvement upon staff in your own enterprise, in your own
Yeah.
headquarters building. They were cheaper. You could have more of them work on things. Automation in the earlier forms, the RPA automations, were incremental on a few different fronts. One, they replaced some of the work that that offshore or onshore team was doing, and they also made you think: Do I need this step? Right? Is the current state the ideal, or can I redesign to a future state? And it was usually an incremental
Mm.
future state redesign. We just don't need that quality assurance check, or we don't need to use an access database in the middle. We can move, numbers from one system to the next.
Yes.
Um, but that's natural because we're working on on an existing mold that we have to evolve slightly, so they will be incremental.
It's hunting marginal
Yep.
gains in the end,
Yeah.
right? The small percentages at the top all the
Right.
time, right?
And so, to the extent that those gains can be achieved more quickly, just because now we've progressed past supposed low code, no code into quite a bit easier prompt oriented coding, where anybody who can articulate a
Mm.
problem with their own natural spoken language can start to have software or applications or products sort of come out of nowhere, manifest themselves. Um, so that will help us to accelerate the incremental transformation. The game changing one, to your point, I mean, it's I guess is it game changing if no enterprise has a shared service operation anymore because that work was routine and rule based? Maybe, but if the game is offering banking services or selling sneakers, the shared service operation wasn't a key part of that game anyway.
This wasn't
It
the
was
game. No, it wasn't the
it
game.
was the
No. Yeah.
supporting player. Um, if if we never bank the same way ever again because we've got an algorithm that just sort of knows what it is that we need and allocates our funds and provides us what we need when we need it, maybe that's
Yeah, we get rid of interfaces. We just have data lakes, and then we have interpreting AIs on top,
right.
right? Something
Yeah,
like that alluding to,
totally.
right?
Or I mean, supply
That's a
chain.
game changer.
Supply chain is made up of all sorts of different players in a massive complex ecosystem that creates, by its very nature, creates friction and lack of
Mm.
information, which manifests, if you want to refer back to the book, manifests in the form of inefficiency, which could create higher degrees of pollution, et cetera. So it
Yeah.
could game change that by just knowing what you need to stock your shelf or to support a power grid, and it gets you what you need from
Yeah.
where it makes the most sense to get it.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. You've also on that point actually. You also written recently for the Harvard Business Review a an article on citizen developers together with some co-authors. I can't remember
Yep.
exactly. Um, the thing is here, is are we going to have an IT department in 5 years, Ian?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. And so, yeah, so the here I've got the magazine right here. So the
Oh, great.
um, the article in HBR is called "We're All Programmers Now," and to your point, the two
Hmm.
co-authors were Karim Tomak and Tom Davenport, and
Yes.
and we we were we were intrigued by that very question. Ultimately, as technology gets easier and it gets easier to for a non-technical person to use, which the vernacular is citizen.
Yes.
Um, so the citizen developer, we would assert, isn't necessarily the fair thing to call it, but the citizens that understand what the problem is and understand that technologies exist and are more and more able to use technology. Um, Low code, no code gave that promise. This is back to like robot for every person sort of thing. Now that
Yes.
didn't assert that the person was developing and teaching the robot. They just had one by their side to use. Although to some degree the low code premise was you can train your own digital twin. Um, it didn't pan out that way. That was harder
Mm.
than people had hoped. But with this new technology, more and more people can use this, whether they're in finance or HR or the marketing department, what have you. They can start to code, if you will, applications and solutions for themselves.
Mm.
In that reality, IT doesn't go away; IT evolves. because most of those citizens still, you can't expect them to have a robust understanding of data security and integrity, or the existing systems and architecture that the business will still run on, or risk management, or compliance, or right. There's a lot of things that a citizen is a subject matter
Yeah,
expert.
that other mega trend, right? Automation, one mega trend, security compliance, the other
Yeah,
mega trend, right? Those two mega trends
yeah.
dominate.
So our belief is that IT sort of bifurcates almost. It has its primary job of keeping the big systems running, but it has an equally important job of providing guardrails, guidance, and governance to this explosion of citizenry, so as to keep them in line and keep them from sharing personal data or financial or health or whatever else by mistake, um, but also not being just a blocker, not the one that says no, you can't do that, but let us introduce you to how you can do that. And we've got courses and certifications and stage gates where we review your idea and then support you in the development of whatever code you're
But that's also
running.
saying no, isn't it, Ian? That is actually saying no.
It's well, I mean, you can't have complete anarchy because then people will start uploading all of your IP into large language models publicly on the cloud, and that's just not a sustainable model.
Yeah, I always say, back when in the RPA days, I always said, don't give an employee an RPA bot that you wouldn't give a super user access to your SAP system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can move through the interface with a bot,
Right,
why not just let him, bulk upload it anyway,
right,
right? And mess up your database. It's the same thing, but there's this weird disconnect between those two realities back
right.
then. Oh, you can have an RPA bot, but no, you can't be allowed to bulk upload. You'll ruin the
Mm-hmm.
database. But hey guys, we're sort of doing the same thing because sometimes slow is just a
Right,
design to make sure we do the
right.
right thing. All right. I think that's something that we need to also make sure people understand that controlling controls means that sometimes things has to move slow. That's how that's how we build our governments,
Yes,
right? In modern democracies, to be slow.
right, right.
That's the deep state thing,
It
right?
needs to be
Deep
methodical.
deep
Right.
IT.
You don't want.
Yeah, it has to be
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
strict, and so that no one can just move it over and you crash everything with in a heartbeat,
Right.
right?
No, I mean, just pushing
Um,
something live in a live system is certainly the easier, faster, more fulfilling way to do things. But if you don't understand all the
mm,
complexities behind it, you'll take your payroll system down to its knees, and then someone else has to come and
yeah,
solve that problem. So, um,
yeah, and we also, I think we remember we spoke about this last time, Ian, right? Last time we spoke that that everyone can code, right? But does that mean that we will just need more complex things in the future? Like the things we're building today with low code apps is not the things we wanted to build in 2002 because that's easy to do with the new low code
mm,
tools. We want to build something more complex, so we just always increase the bar, right? Like in the napkin code, right? Oh, I've drawn on a napkin the app I
right,
want, and now I've given it to ChatGPT, and
right.
it's built a website for me. I'm like, okay, great, this would be awesome in 1995, right?
Well,
But
I
do
think
you need?
the one interesting thing, and I'm having a lot of fun taking a look at this area too. One I've spent some time looking at the citizenry and the enablement and broader democratization
Mm,
of tooling and design and building of technological answers to operational needs. The other is, and this is just heritage. I most of my career I've worked at big companies and I've worked for big companies, but most companies are small companies and medium companies,
mm,
and they generally don't get the same love just because they're not the same sort of total addressable market in each individual one. As an aggregate, they're
yeah.
very large. There's millions of small businesses, and so I
Yes.
do think this is a really interesting potential for a renaissance for them, because they don't need a big ERP system, nor could they afford it. They don't have an IT department, nor could they afford it. They know their processes better than anybody. They have great potential to create great services and solutions, but they just haven't had the ease of access until now. So I do think that
Yeah.
there's a level of citizenry that will really blossom within the small medium business arena. Not to say that
That's a
they're
good
gonna.
perspective,
I
Ian.
mean, I don't think I don't fool myself into thinking they're going to be building full end to end solutions. But back to the lens concept, they're more aware now than perhaps they ever have been. And
They're also more agile, right?
right,
They also have, it's easier for them to modernize their ERP
right,
systems, and those ERP systems will get built-in functionality, AI
right.
functionality, right? Whereas some old insurance company with a COBOL
Hmm.
monolith system,
That's
right?
right.
They'll get it as an add-on, right? Like digital transformation as an ugly
Exactly.
add-on
Well,
to
because COBOL
instead of something
is like
native.
the core of their planet. You can't strip out a core, otherwise the planet will.
Mm,
But you're right, and then I think those small medium businesses also because of as a service as a concept, because of cloud as a delivery
mm,
mechanism, they may rent much of this capability. They don't have to build it themselves, but I
yeah,
think I think the ability to articulate what they need, prototype it faster, work in this sort
yeah.
of rental framework, I think is going to allow smaller businesses to punch well above their weight and grow and survive in an era where it was mostly the big companies that were able to play with this level of sophistication.
Because RPA was something and AI was something 5 years ago. Only the big
Only the
companies
big ones.
really got bang for the
Yeah.
buck.
Only
Yeah,
the big ones. And even today, the traditional RPA vendors, the feedback from a lot of small mediums is that they're just too expensive. They're not interested in addressing that market. And so I think the backbone of the economy, all of these small medium businesses, have not had the same love or attention for economic reasons. But
mm,
as this technology democratizes, as citizens are empowered, and as delivery mechanisms are more fluid, I think could be the sort of the day of the small medium.
the great democratization, right? No one can get, no one can buy a more fancy iPhone than anyone else, and no one can get a bigger GPT model than
True,
GPT-4, right?
that's right.
I don't know, Claude maybe, but it's kind of the same
That's
thing.
absolutely
We're
right.
all alike. It's about your adaptability rate, the way you can sort of turn your ship around and adopt new
Right.
technology. That that has to be that's what matters
Yes.
now. It's another consideration I've had and talk I have with a lot of my friends and contacts is, are we moving away from a supply side to a more demand side, knowing what you want and then quickly getting it, instead of having to say, oh, I can't get the people who to build this for me, I have to wait and wait, I have a big IT department. Now you can just do it with
See,
in a
I think
heartbeat.
that's fascinating. I've heard discussions around the idea that those product managers, the ones that would hold the interviews with the end customer, who knows what the end customer needs and then has to take that all of that information back to an engineering or R&D or technology
Mm,
team, and then be the ambassador and say, like, I think they need this, and then the IT team's like, nah, we don't think so, plus we can build some cooler other stuff that we think is actually more fun or interesting. And so that creates bad product and bad experience. And to your point, the product
yeah,
managers of the future will be empowered to be the product developers, the product designers and developers of the future. And you
yeah,
cut out that middleman. You'll probably get, hopefully, you'll get better products and services as a result, because so many more people who
yeah.
are closer to the need can actually translate that into action.
So Ian, I think we have had a tour de force here around both the positives and a lot of the negatives, or a lot of the, I'd rather say, cautions for this technology, right? And also comparisons with what we did
Mhm.
right, what we did wrong in the RPA wave and previous automations. Um, and I think it's really nice to land on this more positive note of saying, the SMBs and cutting off the troublesome middleman, maybe getting products we actually need and can harness quicker and better, right? So I think this was a brilliant conversation, Ian. I'm really happy that you've joined.
I am happy I joined too. I'm happy you invited me to join. Thank you so much for inviting me to kick this off. I am so excited for you and for the rest of this. Even though every show after this won't be as good, I'm still excited that
Obviously.
I'm I'm still excited for you and for the show. So thank you so much for having me on.
And Ian, just final question. What is the only constant?
So the go-to answer often will be change, but I think the only constant is the laws of enterprise physics, and by that I mean whether it's macros or RPA or large language models, enterprise physics will always be the same, which is there's a speed at which an enterprise can learn. There's a speed at which it can change. There's a degree to which it resists both of those things, learning and changing.
Yeah.
Um, and so all of those will remain constants that define the ability for enterprises to do anything relevant and useful. So even though, as we talked about, it feels like the Chat GPT Gen AI era is just on steroids and moving so fast. You still can't change so fast when you're in a substrate that doesn't allow for the sort of the bedding in of the roots of that change you're trying to create. So, enterprise physics is my answer.
That's a great answer, Ian. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.